has started. This meeting is being broadcast on Facebook Live.
Morning, Kelly. Hope you had a good birthday, even though you're
Morning.
on time.
Morning, Kelly. Thank you. Exactly on time. Yes, thank you. It was a great day yesterday.
Awesome.
Of doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll be on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Will the Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee meeting of November 11th, 12th come to order? The time is 9 a.m. If I can ask everyone to please silence their cell phones or any noise-making devices at this time. My name is Tamara Paulton, and I'll be your chair for today's Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee meeting. We have with us my vice chair from East Maui, Councilmember Shane Sinensi. Aloha kakahiaka.
Aloha kakahiaka chair, my Maui hikina, and Hau'olila po'aha. Kako.
Hau'olila po'aha. And we also have Councilmember Mike Molina, looks like from the office.
That's right. Aloha, Madam Chair. Blessings to you and my colleagues from beautiful Wailuku, Maui.
And we also have Council Chair Alice Lee.
Madam Chair, Ya'ate. Ya'ate, that's Native American for good morning.
Ya'ate to you too. And from Molokai, we have Council Vice Chair Rollins Fernandez.
Aloha kakahiaka chair, my Molokai nui ahina, and Ya'ate kako.
Ya'ate. And from South Maui, we have Councilmember Kelly King, Ya'ate, and Aloha kakahiaka.
Ya'ate and Aloha kakahiaka.
And as this is one of our off-week meetings, Councilmember Yukile Sugimura couldn't attend today, so we thank her for making the effort. We also have non-voting committee members Ricky Hokama and Tasha Kama, who are welcome to join us at any time. With us today, we have Corp Counsel Michael Hopper, Deputy Corp Counsel. I just wanted to make a little unfortunate announcement. The project representative, although he had initially confirmed with us and we were having conversations with him up until Monday, we've just learned late November 10th evening that he's retired. So they weren't able to get any representative from Honua'ula Partners, Wailea 670 to attend, but I think it'll be okay, and it's always good to be on record of this point in time, I guess, in the transition of where we are at the conditions and whatnot. I mean, I know it's a little unusual, but we gotta just everything's gotta move forward one way or another, so it is what it is. Yes, Member King.
Okay, just for clarification, that Charlie Jenks is retired?
That's the word we got 5:30 Tuesday evening.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and they sent in their email that they don't have anyone I guess available or be picked out. So but he had given his they have sent in a supplemental to Honua'ula Partners annual report, and we can have that loaded up on Granicus. But presently they do not have a representative who's able to attend, and we only learned this after the agenda was posted, and we had confirmed before we posted the agenda that he would be here. So it's just an unfortunate situation. And then moving along from the Department of Planning, Director Michelle McLean. From the Department of Management Administration, we have Janet Six, Principal Archaeologist. Our committee staff, we have Committee Secretary Clarita Balala, Council Services Assistant Clerk Jean Pokipala, legislative analysts Anna Lillis and Laxmi Abraham, as well as legislative attorney Richard E. Mitchell. Today, our agenda item, we have one item on the agenda, which is PSLU 65, Annual Compliance Report on the Change in Zoning for Wailea 670, which is Ordinance 3554. And let me just check in if we have any testifiers that wanted to testify today. Miss Lillis, are you aware?
Aloha, Chair. Yes, we'll be sharing the link to the testimony log right now.
Okay, and I think I forgot to mention we also have Wilton Leawanai and Allison Stewart on the call as well.
There are currently 4 people signed up to testify, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I just was a little slow loading on my. Okay. LUC. Is that Lucien? Oh, Lucien, Jean Schaff, and Lee Altenberg will be part of the presentation. So I believe we only have Kamakana Ferreira as our only testifier. So let me just give the spiel for oral testimony. Oral testimony via phone or video conference will be accepted. Testifiers wanting to provide video testimony should have joined the online meeting via the Blue Jeans meeting link as noted on today's agenda. Written testimony is encouraged by sending your comments to pslu.committee@mauicounty.us or using the e-comment function. Oral testimony is limited to 3 minutes. When your name is called, please unmute yourself by clicking the microphone icon, or if calling by phone, please press *4 to unmute yourself. If you are still testifying beyond that time, I will kindly ask you to complete your testimony. When testifying, please state your name. If you're testifying on behalf of an organization or are a paid lobbyist, please inform the committee. Staff will post a link to the testifiers login chat so testifiers will be able to see where they are on the list. However, please be mindful of the use of chat during the meeting. Chat should be limited to items on the agenda and should not be used to provide testimony or chat with other testifiers. If providing testimony, please be courteous to others by muting your microphone while waiting your turn to testify. Participants who wish to view the meeting only without providing testimony, please view a live cablecast on Akaku Channel 53. You can also visit mauicounty.us agendas to access live and archived meeting videos. I remind committee members, administration, and the public to please be patient with us as we continue to navigate through this new platform. So then I think that the LUC name is Lucienne, and she's a presenter. So our first testifier will be Kamakana Ferreira.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Kamakana Ferreira. I'm the lead compliance specialist with the Office of Foreign Affairs.
Oh, okay. And are you a presenter as well?
No, I'm just here as a resource to Lucienne's group, who I believe is presenting.
Oh, okay. And did you not want to give any testimony?
Yeah, I could provide testimony after they're completed.
Oh, okay.
Chair, you can have him as a resource person as well.
Oh, okay. We'll just do that then. Yeah. It looks like there's nobody else wanting to testify at this time then. Members, any objection with closing public testimony?
No objection.
No objections.
Okay, and if we do receive any additional written testimony, we can always accept that into the record. Well, I guess we get right into it then. PSLU 65 Annual Compliance Report on the change in zoning for Wailea 670. The committee is in receipt of General Communication 20-3 dated May 26, 2020 from Honua'ula, transmitting a copy of the Honua'ula Annual Compliance Report to Maui County Council, change in zoning 2000-009 and PH1 2000/0001 in accordance with Condition 29 of Ordinance 3554. So I scheduled this item as a follow-up to the presentation we received from Mr. Jenks of Honua'ula Partners. It was a request from some of the members as well as some members of the community to get the community cultural practitioners and citizen science information that they had collected, and seeing as how Mr. Jenks has kind of abruptly retired, I think it is good to get this sort of point in time for whoever becomes the new representative to get a feel for where we're at. So I think it's still fairly important that we have this meeting to go over these things. Before we open up, let's see, are there any additional comments from Planning, Corp Council, or the Department of Management at this time before we start with the community presentation?
Aloha, Chair. Good morning.
Aloha, Director McLean. Good morning.
I'll just state that we have been, the planning department is sort of serving as the middleman between the developer and OHA and SHPD, because the way that the condition is worded calls for SHPD and OHA to both approve the preservation plan. And so if either of those agencies makes a change, then the other agency is going to want to see that change so that ultimately both agencies approve the exact same document. And so it takes a little bit, and just to be on the up and up rather than relying on the developer to provide the revised versions to each, it's going through the planning department. We're ultimately the ones that have to determine if the condition has been satisfied. And so playing that role will help us to do that so that we can be certain that both agencies have reviewed and ultimately we anticipate approving the same document. And then at that point, we can determine that that condition has been satisfied.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Anything from Corporation Counsel at this point?
Yeah, Madam Chair, the agenda does talk about a presentation from the developers and a discussion of related matters, and notes no legislative action would be taken. It would be good to clarify if there's a, I guess you had said community presentation, what that would be under, if that's designated certain people as resource persons, and a discussion of the related matters related to the presentation of the developer, or on the agendized item, which is the compliance report. I don't know if I've seen a situation where there's no presentation from those that actually have to do the compliance, but there's resource personnel presentations. I mean, if under the council rules you believe there's people that qualify as resource persons, generally you can allow them to testify. But if you're going over the compliance report, I mean, there's no legislative action taken, but I think you'd want to be clear what action is being, or what actually is being done here. If it's the resource personnel assisting the council in reviewing this matter, that's an option. Another option could be to defer until the presentation is ready to go from the developer, since that was what was put on the agenda. So That's the only issue that I would potentially see. But I think in general you could have a resource persons discuss an issue that's on your agenda if that's what this is.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Yes, consistent with Rule 18 of the Council, they have expertise in this area, and we will take note whether or not they are paid lobbyists.
Okay, yeah, I think that's acceptable as far as the general item. You're not going to receive a presentation from the developers, which was agendized. You are discussing related matters, and the item itself, as long as the testimony is to the compliance report, then I think that's something you can do. But with the caveat that the agenda did say there'd be a presentation from developers, so that's just something to note.
Thank you. Yeah, we have received a supplemental report, and we can post that up as well. But yeah, thank you. So and I think we'll wait to hear from Dr. Six until after the community presentation. For us presenting today, we have Clara Apana, Daniel Kanahele, Dr. Jean Schaaf, and Dr. Lee Altenberg as part of the presentation, as well as Kamakana Ferreira as a resource person. So, Ms. Dene, did you want to unmute your video and your microphone? And we can get started with the presentation.
I'm not Ms. Dene, but...
Aloha, Mr. Kanahele.
Aloha, Mai Kako, Chair Paulton, and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to give this community presentation on the annual compliance report of Honua'ula Partners, LLC. Before we begin, I wanted to give each of the community members an opportunity to briefly introduce themselves. Three of us are here in a house in Wailuku. One is in Honolulu and the other one is in Alaska. So I'm going to begin by introducing myself. Again, my name is Daniel Kanahele. I actually live in the moku of Honua'ula in the Ahupua'a of Pai'ahu, in the area known as Maui Meadows subdivision, which is immediately adjacent to the project area. I am intimately acquainted with the project area, having spent probably hundreds of hours up there studying and learning as a Kanaka. I've always felt that I have a kuleana to malama the resources of the area I live in and to know what those resources are. And so I have practiced that for as long as I lived in this area. I have also submitted countless testimonies on the archaeological inventory survey for this project, the draft EIS, testified many times before government bodies like yourself on this project. So that's briefly a little bit about myself. So now I'm going to ask Dr. Lee Altenberg, if you wouldn't introduce yourself, followed by Dr. Jeannie Schaaf.
And would resources please just mention whether or not they are paid lobbyists as well?
None of us are paid lobbyists. We're all community members and spent a lot of hours, volunteer hours, maka'ala this project.
Thank you.
So if Dr. Altenberg is on the line, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to introduce yourself, followed by Dr. Schaaf.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Lee Altenberg. I'm a theoretical population geneticist. I'm a professor in the graduate faculty of ecology, evolution, and conservation biology at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And so I wrote the 2007 report that is explicitly mentioned in Condition 27 of the rezoning ordinance. And the way that I got involved, so I should mention, my involvement with the project with Wailea 670 has been entirely as a volunteer, and I've never received compensation. So, so I moved to Maui from Duke University in 1994 to care for my dad. And coming to Hawaii, Hawaii is world famous among biologists for being one of the crown jewels of the evolutionary process because it's so remote. It's the closest thing that we have to another planet on Earth to observe the evolutionary process. So I was very excited to get here, but it's also known world famous for being having a tragic level of extinction of these crown jewels. And so when I got here, I felt it was a professional obligation to get involved with conservation. And so I, learned what was going on Maui in terms of endangered habitats, and learned about since I lived in South Kihei, that was my bioregion, and I learned about dryland forest conservation. And in 2002, the Palawea development had been approved, had been rezoned and approved for development. And there were some extraordinarily rare plants there, the aviki-viki and the nehe. And the Native Hawaiian Plant Society membership asked me to see if I could locate them and try to save what was left of them before the development occurred. And we did. And then I was wondering what else survived on this particular habitat, which was a lava flow, which is where the last of the dryland forest habitat survives. And I found that that's what brought me to Charlie Jenkins and Wailea 670, which is that is the land that's Mauka of Palawea. And I asked if I could take a look at this and to see what was there. And when I did, I discovered this was extraordinary habitat. And it was comparable to the two other best remaining pieces of dryland forest habitat, one being Kanaio, which is a natural area reserve, and the other being Pu'okali, which is just below Red Hill in Kihei, which is on Hawaiian Homeland's property and has been fenced off to preserve it from axis deer grazing. So Wailea 670 is the third best remnant of this critically endangered lowland dry forest ecosystem, with the dominant tree being Willy Willy. And so I told Mr. Jenks of my finding and said, this part of the property needs to be set aside in perpetuity as a heritage for future generations to see some of what's left of this ecosystem. And subsequently, he didn't take my advice and proposed to only preserve six acres out of about 190 acres. And that's when I wrote the special report, which compares the ecological value of the southern portion of Honua'ula property with the other remnants of dry forest on Maui. So eventually, this report led to the creation of Condition 27, and that's my current connection with the issue.
Dr. Jeannie Schaaf, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry not to be on video. I haven't figured that out yet. This is my first blue jeans. I'm sitting here with about a foot of new snowfall here in Anchorage, and so I'm envying you your sunshine. I'm an archaeologist, and I live half the year in Kihei, and became involved with the W670 by being invited by cultural users and the Sierra Club to help identify sites and to walk the land. About 3 years ago, I guess I've been doing this. And I'm retired from the National Park Service here in Alaska from 30 years of efforts of preserving of cultural heritage of the Native Alaskans here. And it's something that I've always been very committed to, and it's very important to me. And so in walking the land with the cultural users, the significance of the landscape became so apparent to me. And while I've not worked in Hawaii, I have read the books of Hawaiian scholars who place the unique development of agriculture in Hawaii, such as it's represented in the parcel W670. They rank that as a very significant event, and it was this kind of agriculture was not developed anywhere else in the world. So the significance of this land has really struck me, and I'm very committed to trying to protect it and trying to understand what it means. And that's why I'm here. And I'm sorry about the video because I get to see you, but you can't see me.
Thank you, Dr. Shafe.
Next, I would like to have Claire Apana briefly introduce herself, followed by Lucienne Dene. Then following Lucienne, we'd like to ask if the staff could put up our slide presentation, because that's what we're going to use to give our community presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. Oops.
Good morning.
Clara Plana from Wailuku. Hang on, we're just getting feedback. Let me change computers. Yeah, just turn that off. I can turn it off for you, and you can just go to the other computer. Is it on? Okay, good morning again.
Good morning
Clara
again.
Plana from Wailuku. Thank you. It is such an honor to be able to present this information to you today. It is really a work of so many citizens, so many of the local people, and many descendants who have come and found their connection back to their families in the land, and a connection for many of us to a place that is pretty much untouched, and the culture is still there. You know, the life of our culture is still in the land. And so for myself, besides protecting the waters that will be below such a development, the protecting the life of our culture, to see that places that our culture still lives in, are preserved and adequately protected. So that has been my goal and involvement for the last 12 years. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Aloha. I'm Lucienne Dene, and I've gotten involved with this area, Palawea and Keaho and Haiahu, through my friend, the late great Ed Lindsay, who cared very deeply about this place and the lands below it, Palawea. He and his wife used to take me hiking there, down at the lower part of Palawea by the ocean. And he was so sad that his health did not permit him to walk the land and really experience the rich diversity of plants and cultural sites that was there. But, you know, it was his dying wish that we all, and he gathered with myself, Claire, Daniel, and others, that we all carry on and keep the voice of this place alive. And so we have. So we can begin our slideshow now. And I think, Daniel, you're starting out our first slides, yeah.
Okay, members, any objection to designating all these folks that have introduced themselves to you as resource people?
No objections.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead and this information has been uploaded to Granicus if you guys might need to refresh, but the presentation and the supplemental from Honua'ula is on Granicus as well. Please proceed, Mr. Kanahele.
Okay, I'll just wait till the first slide is up. Let me begin by just thanking the committee again for the opportunity to give this community presentation on our concerns and findings with regards to the 30 conditions that were imposed upon the project when it was approved in April of 2008. And so we are going to look specifically at just a couple of those conditions and share our findings with you. The project itself is found on the leeward side of Maui and the southwest flank of Haleakala. Here is a picture of a site on that project area. The project name is Honua'ula, but the moku that the project is in is also called Honua'ula. Previously, the project had several names. Before Honua'ula, it was called Wailea 670. So we may use that interchangeably in our presentation. Wailea 670, Honua'ula, it's the same project. Next slide, please. So why does Honua'ula have 30 conditions of zoning? Well, maybe some of you will recall that this was a very controversial project when it came out. There were a lot of people for and against it. Those of us who had concerns about the project had to do, in many cases, with what we felt was an incomplete zoning application. We felt that it was missing important information for decision makers like the county council at that time. And that included an incomplete archaeological survey and or preservation plan, and an not yet completed botanical survey was also missing from the zoning application. As a result of that, 30 conditions were imposed on the project. Some of them were standard conditions, and others were fill the gap conditions to ensure that the landowners actually provided adequate information to mitigate the project's impacts, especially on cultural resources. Next slide, please. So the developers made many promises to the community. Among those were that there would be an affordable housing component. 250 affordable housing units were going to be built in North Kihei within 2 years of approval, and that there would be more jobs. As you recall, 2008 was when the recession hit us hard. But 12 years later, we see none of those promises have materialized. The vote was very close. I was actually there when the vote was taken. It was 5-4. Chair Okama, Councilmember Anderson from South Maui, Joanne Johnson from West Maui, and Bill Medeiros voted against it. And then, but it got a majority vote, including a vote by Councilmember Victorino, who said that when he was asked by Mark Hamilton in a newspaper interview, Maui News interview, in the 30/20/2008 issue, as whether or not he made the right decision, his answer to that was, only time will tell us. But we have the opportunity to put the onus on the developer and the responsibility to make sure that they follow through, meaning on the conditions of zoning. Next slide, please. So one of the conditions we're going to look at is condition number 2, and I'm going to turn over
We're gonna do this.
It's going to be a tag team on two.
Yeah. Thank you. Condition 2 is very important. It's about transportation improvements. We all know this is a very large project. 1,400 units were planned. It's now down to about 1,150. That's still a big change. That's bigger than Maui Meadows. That's a big change in this neighborhood. And what was required was basically that the community plan be followed. The community plan anticipated this kind of growth even back in '98 and said, you're going to need Pi'ilani Highway to be 4 lanes all the way to Wailea Iki Drive, before you have these large new developments that are approved in this community plan, but before they can be implemented. And that included McKenna, the second phase of Wailea, and what was then called Wailea 670. So there's a very specific condition that these 2 additional lanes have to be added in the section basically from Maui Meadows to the beginning of Wailea. That had to be done before any construction could start on the project. Well, we have zoning reports every year that say, yes, we did an EA on this back in, it got approved in 2012, and we're working on it. But actually, there has been a lot going on. Can I have the next slide, please? What's happened is that a private agreement between one of those large developers who's supposed to contribute to this project, Wailea Resort, which was under the control of A&B at the time, made a private agreement with the Department of Transportation in 2014. I did send that over to your staff in case any of you are interested in looking in the weeds. The agreement just says that that they've agreed that this will satisfy Wailea's conditions of zoning. It doesn't say what was agreed to. That was in a separate traffic mitigation plan from 2014 also. But basically, a solution has been offered that would expand Pi'ilani Highway by 1 lane, not 2. But this is never mentioned in the compliance report. We don't know if HP is going to come back and say, basically, we'd like to change this condition because the Department of Transportation has said that that 3rd lane will do us really good till 2035. So why should we build 4? So none of this is really known. It really should be known up front. Also, I think it's important to bring up that the 3-lane version of Pi'ilani Highway was never discussed in this EIS that Mr. Jenks and the HP report refers us to. So you have a solution. It might be a terrific solution. It's never been discussed, and it has a lot of impacts on Maui Meadows. You can see from this map, if you add a lane on the Maui Meadows side, you're really doing a lot of construction in front of where hundreds of people live. If you did it on the Makai side, it would disrupt one small existing neighborhood. But the powers that be want to put it on the uphill side, on the Maui Meadows side, and Daniel's going to weigh in a little bit about the Maui Meadows perspective.
So the language for the widening of the Pi'ilani Highway all the way to Wailea Ike is found on page 30 of the Kihei McKenna Community Plan, if you want to look that up. So about 10 years or so ago, the Honua'ula developers and HDOT met with community members to discuss the widening of the highway, Pi'ilani Highway, between Kilohana and Wailea Ike to 4 lanes. And it was attended by many of my neighbors where I live in Maui Meadows to apprise us of what was going to happen, what may happen in the future. So as Lucian shared, in 2014, there was another plan proposed to reduce the widening from 4 to 3 lanes. Well, none of us in Maui Meadows knew anything about this until I would say a month ago. The president of the Maui Meadows Neighborhood Association was recently alerted. Buck Joyner is very, very active in the community regarding the intersection. Miki Oi and Pi'ilani didn't know anything about it. I sat on the Maui Meadows Neighborhood Board from 2012 and 2018. Neither Honua'ula, Wailea Resort, McKenna Resort ever mentioned anything about this plan. to reduce the widening by 1 lane. It all caught us completely off guard. And we're very concerned as residents of Maui Meadows about the impact this widening is going to have on the Mauka side, or our side, our subdivision moving forward. So this is a big red flag and alert to everybody that this is a plan that has lacked, proposed plan that has lacked community transparency, and it's caused some consternation amongst those of us who are residents of Maui Meadows.
Thanks, Daniel. So moving on to the next slide, please. This is a condition of zoning. We assume the planning department is aware of this because they recently said that it was up to the Department of Transportation. But we're concerned that it doesn't comply with our community plan. And we really would like HP to reveal if they're going to modify condition 2, or if they're planning to eventually build a 4th lane just by, and if they are knowledgeable about this kind of end run that's being done. So next slide, we'll get to our next topic. So condition 20 is a very important condition. It has to do with marine water quality testing and having a baseline. And the Land Use Commission back in 1993 urbanized the portion of land in Wailea 670 that came in for rezoning. And it put a condition of zoning about water quality monitoring too, because this is the first big development, new development to be proposed upslope of what are some of the most popular and well-used and economically important beaches on Maui. The whole, beaches for Palauea, Wailea, Keawakapu. So condition 20 built on this requirement, and there really wasn't a lot of information getting to the Department of Health from this condition from the Land Use Commission. So a very, very specific condition was carefully crafted by this consul, and it required that not only is this testing be done at a yearly basis of both reef life, so the biota that lives on our reefs and how is it doing, and the reef health, but also the water quality. What are the nitrates? What are the phosphates? What are the total nitrogen? What are all these different components of the chemistry of the water? So we get a report every year from HP that says, we're doing the testing and we're turning the results in to the Department of Health. Next slide, please. But here is the current report from the Department of Health. They publish these reports every 2 years and send them to the federal EPA about how we're doing on water testing and water compliance with the Clean Water Act. The beaches highlighted in green are some of the Wailea beaches. There's a second page, which I didn't put up, that has more. But you can see when you look to the right, there are all these blank columns that just have like little dashes in them. Those are all supposed to have data. And that data is supposed to be coming from the reports that Wailea 670 is required to do. Now, those reports exist. We finally got them sent to us, I think, in September. But the consultants for those reports, Steve Dollar and his firm, Marine Research Associates, whatever it is, they do report to the Department of Health on other areas that they are testing. They are listed as a contributor of information for waters in Oahu and some other waters in Maui, but nothing in the Wailea area. And that's why we have these big blank spots. So 12 years ago, we were trying to get some baseline data, and it hasn't been presented to the Department of Health. So next slide, please. Claire is going to talk about why this is important.
So you can imagine why this is an important thing to do, to try to get a baseline of what the ocean is like in good conditions before anything happens. But in 2019, what we were really hoping would never happen happened in Kahamanini Bay, which is where the Grand Wailea is on that bay, had to close because of bacterial growth. And what will happen to our ocean when people cannot go swimming and people are afraid to go swimming? I'm afraid to go swimming, you know, and we saw a remarkable change and resurgence of health at the ocean. And I think that if we can continue to get the data, we can actually plan better. What I found when I tried to find it was I called the Clean Water Branch. They didn't have it. They didn't have imposed standards. And I think that is really where it is, that we need to have imposed standards for the groundwater, for the runoff that is not there. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Sorry, this isn't very professional, but we're unpaid volunteers. We spend our time doing the research. So our conclusion is condition 20 is not being met. DOH has confirmed by letter to your committee that it does not report having any data from the HP consultants. And it's pretty obvious, there's their latest report. No report has been used in their reports for the last 10 years. I went back and looked at the 2-year reports that are turned into the federal government. They have the same blank spaces in 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016. The Department of Aquatic Resources is also supposed to be getting information on the health of the reefs. I contacted them personally, Russell Sparks. He said they haven't received anything from the consultants. So we have a compliance report that is telling both the Land Use Commission, they refer to the same studies in the Land Use Commission reporting every year, and Maui County is being told that there's compliance, but it doesn't appear that perhaps the consultants know that they're supposed to transmit this testing data. It says that the testing data is turned into Department of Health in the compliance report, but this really isn't happening. So we would ask that this actually be enforced, because the idea is when this development is built, if it is ever built, we need to compare how the ocean is doing now and how the ocean is doing later so that we can adjust things that are happening upslope if they need to be adjusted. That's the point of having the baseline. Next slide, please. Lee, you're on. Dr. Altenberg is going to speak to the compliance with the 130-acre native plant preserve and the conservation plan. And I'm going to join in a bit on some of the tech matters. So Lee's already told you a little bit about why this is such an important area. But Lee, do you want to go into what we've heard over the years about its lack of importance? You're mute, Lee. We can't. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so subsequent to the rezoning and this condition 27, the aviki, which is the purple flower vine that is the source of the original Mauna Loa lei. If you've seen those beautiful purple leis, it's the aviki flower. That was the original species used for that, and that became listed endangered species in 2013. And subsequently in 2016, the southern portion of the property where the AKA flow is became listed as critical habitat for its recovery. And other endangered species that have been observed on the property is the blackburn sphinx moth, which is Manduca blackburni. I'll just call it Manduca. And so that was also it's also critical habitat for its survival. So the general issue is that human commercial activity is destroying the natural world, and that's why governments have put regulations to try to allow the activity to continue, but without destroying natural world for posterity. And so the real question is the machinery of our zoning doing what it's intended to do, which is to protect it? And the main problem, one of the main concerns is that it's been 12 years now since that zoning, and axis deer are just running amok in this native habitat, and the developer's consultant has documented the damage that the deer are doing. It's on the plan to build a deer exclusion fence around the 130 acres that are to be a conservation easement for the perpetual protection of this habitat, but that hasn't happened yet. And the other thing is, ironically, the Endangered Species Act in its machinery has prompted the developer to destroy half of the host plants for manduka, which is this non-native tree tobacco that the larvae feast on when they're growing into pupae. And so the developer left half of the host plant population that's in this conservation area intact, but he destroyed half of it that's next to it. That's supposed to be some kind of a conservation buffer zone. And
we go to the next slide because we're transitioning into that area, that regulatory area, please.
So, and this he just reported in the previous meeting of this committee, which was news to all of us for the first time. And so that, having destroyed half the habitat, the host plants of the endangered manduka, they petitioned to get out of this review of their conservation habitat plan. And however, getting an approval of this plan is mandated in condition 27. So let Lucien continue with the details of that mandate.
Yeah, well, it's pretty simple. Condition 27 says you need a conservation plan. You need a plan that's actually reviewed and approved, not just you get some comments, but approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DLNR, which in this case is Department of Forestry and Wildlife, and USGS. USGS bowed to the other two agencies, said this is more your kuleana, but we support, you taking a look at this. And a habitat conservation plan was crafted starting back in 2009 to address the fact that there are endangered species on the site. And what we're being told now with the new study, and it's important to understand this new study was done during one season and an extreme drought. And it said, wow, we went out there in the middle of the drought, and you know what? These creatures were just not reproducing, so they don't live here anymore. Well, I think all of us with common sense know that our native species, especially ones that are endangered, probably are doing their best to reproduce when the conditions are favorable. So you're not going to see them around when conditions are extremely unfavorable. And it is 200 acres that you need to look at or more. And in fact, moths have been seen on the whole 670 acres and the caterpillars as well. So we feel that this new study that is resulting in no habitat conservation plan with federal review actually is kind of a violation of Condition 27. Next slide, please. Because the long and the short of it is that the folks at Fish and Wildlife and the Forestry Department at the state have no rules for reviewing just someone's nice idea of a conservation plan. They have rules for reviewing a federal conservation habitat conservation plan. And all along, you folks have been told that this was in the works. They went to the Planning Commission. HP went to the Planning Commission in 2018 and said, we want to satisfy this Condition 27. Can you look at our draft habitat conservation plan and say that, you approve of it? And they did. But now we don't know exactly what the plan will be. HP might say, we're going to do exactly the same plan. But I have to tell you that the feds are not going to approve a plan that has no teeth to it. Basically, there's no enforcement protocols. And by withdrawing from this agreement, there will be no enforcement. So that's really food for thought for the planning department and the consul on how this is going to work out. It's kind of like we've been told one thing for the last 10 years. Well, first we were told there was nothing there. That really wasn't true. Now we've been told, well, we're working on it and doing the right thing. And that was true up until a couple of months ago. And now we're being told, oh, guess what? We're deciding there's nothing there because we did a survey in the middle of a drought. And so we don't have to do any federal reviewed plan. So this is a very, very problematic situation. Next slide, please. Also, the plan kind of triggered a consultation called a 106 consultation. And that was about bringing in Native Hawaiian perspective to the habitat plan. And once again, the pattern was first HP told the feds, oh yeah, this has already been done. And then OHA beneficiaries spoke up and they said, no one ever told us we were being consulted. And so OHA wrote and said, you know, you haven't done a 106. You need to start that process now. And that seems to be the trigger for the HP folks saying, oh, we got to bail on this agreement. If we have to do this 106, we don't want to talk to these people anymore. It's like we just want to do what we want to do. That's kind of how it looks to us. So since we're not going to really have a plan that's approved by DLNR or U.S. Geological Service, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, not sure how we're going to get real compliance with Condition 27. So this habitat plan is voluntary, but it's necessary because we need something that's enforceable. Without any oversight on the plan, you can have a beautiful plan and only us citizens will tell you whether it's happening or not, and that's really not right. Next slide, please. So we're getting into preservation of historic sites, and we're all going to jump in here, but I think, Daniel, were you going to take the first part here about where we started out?
Yeah, I just tagged in. So we're looking at conditions 13 and 26. 13 is the condition that has to do with the Cultural Resources Preservation Plan, which was an idea the developer came up with and became a condition. And condition 26 has to do with the Preservation Mitigation Plan. That's something that SHPE does review. The CRPP is something that SHPE does not have any guidelines to review, a Cultural Resource Preservation Plan. So one of the CRPP and the Preservation Plan is based on the integrity of the Archaeological Inventory Survey. The Archaeological Inventory Survey is key and has been a bone of contention from 2008 to the present day. And it has actually been the Achilles heel of this whole project moving forward. When the project was approved in 2008, they had 28 archaeological sites in their draft AIS. Now, citizens said there were more than that, many undocumented sites. And over the years, they provided data to State Historic Preservation Division through photographs, through comments sent in, and through meetings with SHPE, and also meetings with SHPE and the developers with the community members to try to work this out. Anyway, as the saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Finally, SHPE decided to do a site visit. The branch archaeologist, chief branch archaeologist, Teresa Dunham, came out and did a site visit to confirm whether or not the community concerns were legitimate. And as it turns out, they were legitimate. And she said that SHPE would not approve the AIS until the developers had done more surveys and done more consultation. Consultation is something we pushed early on The only consultation that was done when this project came out, and then in 2009 was a questionnaire sent out to various entities and groups asking if they had any cultural knowledge. And there were only 12 responses received, though that was not enough. That was very inadequate consultation. So we pushed for more consultation on site identification and significance. So anyway, you know, they wanted to get the car out, and this condition was like a recall notice on a car. When your car is recalled, like my Honda CR-V, recalled because the airbag is defective. I'm going in tomorrow to repair it. So the AIS has had many, many recall notices over the years to correct defaults in that. And I hope to correct my airbag tomorrow when I go to Island Honda. Okay, next slide, please. Do you want to talk about the suit? Okay, so here's a visual. The map on the left is what was in the 2012 Wailea 670 EIS. All those lines are walls, and those were documented, and every little dot are cultural sites. So in that photograph, there are 40 archaeological sites with 60 features. The map on the right is when they rebooted the archaeological survey, hired a new company to do a new AIS, and all of those numbers are all the archaeological sites and features that they found as a result of that. So it's like, imagine if you're out looking at the stars right after sunset, right? And you can only see a couple of stars. But imagine if you wait until midnight on a moonless night and suddenly all those other stars appear in the heaven. There's thousands of it. That's what the rebooted AIS did. It revealed what was truly there on the land, which was not shown in the 2012 EIS, which was not known to the council members at the time they approved this project. What a cultural treasure we had in the site. Look at all those stars. Look at all those sites. So just to give you an idea. Next slide, please. So here's a satellite view of the Honua'ula project area. For those of you who are not familiar with it, looking is west, and that's Wailea Resort. The top, which is Mauka, that's owned by Ulapalakua Ranch. You go to the far left, that's where Maui Meadows is. And if you go to the far right, you know, beyond the picture, that's where Kamakana Resort is. So hopefully that'll give you an idea of where this 670 plus acres is located. And all those dots that you see on the southern third far right are the cultural sites that were discovered as a result of the new survey, which was done in 2013. And to the left side, you see fewer sites. When the AIS came out of the county council in 2008, there was only one documented site in the 480 or so acres in the northern portion. But when they redid the survey, they found 74 more sites for a total of 75 sites. So what we have here is a cultural landscape. It's one of Maui's original sustainable developments. You have to imagine people living there hundreds and hundreds of years ago without any ships coming in, you know, container ships bringing our basic supplies. Basically, the ancient Kanaka Maoli learned to sustain themselves on the land by using what was in their surrounding environment. As Ed Lindsay often calls it, the Hawaiian culture can be summed up into two words, sticks and stones, right? Sticks being the native plants that were used for building material, medicines, and food and so forth, and the stones being the natural things, the rocks that were used to build platforms, ceremonial sites, hales, and so on and so forth. So that was the first sustainable development, and we can learn a lot by studying this area about how to be sustainable in Maui moving forward. Next slide, please. So one of the value of Honua'ula is the educational opportunities that it provides to not only Kanaka Maoli, but to our youth, Kanaka and non-Kanaka alike. So Claire's going to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the picture.
This is one of the many different days where educational groups were able to come on the land. This is actually the Seventh-day Adventist school. Oh, this is the Kihei Charter School. And the importance of this is that this is really a classroom. It really could be termed a classroom. And the comments by the students, if you could even imagine, getting out in the natural environment and being able to see things in their natural element, which is so different than our world that is completely engineered and built for us. So the next slide. Yeah. So the day that we went with the school from the Seventh-day Adventist, we kind of played archaeologists and asked the kids, well, what do you think this is that we use for? What do you think? And they just went to town with what the possibilities of why that things were designed and built in such a way. And it was amazing to hear what they had to say. And so the bringing people on the land, the ability to do this will disappear if the resources are gone. This particular area is not in a preservation. And there are many areas like it where the opportunity to learn and the actual sites, the actual cultural sites are still there in their natural form as they were built and used for regular life by the Kanaka Maoli who lived there. This is one of the reasons why we say that it needs to be well documented, and it needs to have the voice of people who are not looking to build mansions, but who are looking towards the balance of having this life and the land go on. Next slide. Yeah.
So this slide divides the project area into two parts, the southern 1/3 portion and the northern 2/3 portion in green. The southern 1/3 portion had well over 100 sites and thousands of features, and the northern had 75 recorded sites. What I wanted to point out here is that the southern portion, there were two studies, right? Two AISs, separate AISs. The southern portion got a great deal of review, and the northern portion got far less review and consultation from interested and knowledgeable parties. And so sometimes we feel that because of the lack of review and time spent there, that there may be sites not documented. We believe there are sites not documented, and that the significance evaluation hadn't taken into consideration people that had knowledge of the area. See, if you see on the far left these two red lines going from the top to the bottom, that is the roadway, that is the access point for the Pai'ahu solar project, which is going to be above Maui Meadows, more or less. One of the concerns that we have as community members is that the roadway, the archaeologists for the solar project weren't able to find sites that were in the AIS was done by Honua'ula. And so our concern is that because of the lack of perhaps accuracy in the Honua'ula AIS, some sites might be unintentionally destroyed as they move material up the road and maybe have to widen the new roadway up to the solar farm. Next slide, please. So I think, Lucia, yeah, you're up.
Well, thank you for listening through this. Obviously, not everyone is as fascinated by this place as we are, but we think it's important that hundreds and hundreds of students and groups have been, and cultural groups and others have been able to access the land and have a real experience of Maui, a real experience of Palauea, of Paiahu, of these storied ahupua'as that have just been taken over by our, commercial Western culture. So this is kind of a chance to get it right. So we heard that the archaeological work up to 2012 was rejected. We had this new survey that showed umpteen sites. That was really wonderful. But then I'm here to talk about what happened. So after the new survey was done in 2013, the plan was then sent to State Historic, SHPE, and because Condition 26 requires a preservation plan to be approved by SHPE and OHA. So the first step to that preservation plan is you send in the AIS, the Archaeological Inventory Survey. We all started weighing in on this because between that big map of dots that you saw earlier and the AIS survey, just a lot of sites disappeared. And we knew many of these sites. We visited them. We had told the archaeologists that they existed. We had shown pictures. We had had slideshows, like years before this new archaeological team started. We had been providing proof that there were additional and important sites there. And a lot of these sites just didn't make it onto the maps. So we started asking State Historic to, require more work, to find out what happened to these missing sites and so forth. And it just didn't happen. What happened was that OHA did the best they could. They reviewed this plan for like 2 years. They kept asking for changes to be made. And then finally, in 2015, I think it was like April or May or something of 2015, they said, okay, it's good enough. You've done some of the things we asked, and we're just signing off on it. Well, they signed off on a plan that was actually missing like at least 50 sites that had been documented and were really there and were really important, but they just weren't in this plan. So OHA beneficiaries asked OHA, who needs to review the preservation plan, which is based on this AIS. The AIS is missing all these sites. Of course, the preservation plan is missing all these sites. And the beneficiary said, OHA, could you please just not rubber stamp this and get some accountability here? And OHA's tried, and you can ask them questions later. But really, the developers came back and they said, well, look, we're going to do more archaeological studies. We'll do it before we do our subdivisions. Each area that's going to be subdivided and built, we'll have an archaeological study there. Well, of course, that's really not the way to do it because you're building roads, you're installing utilities, you're doing all this stuff before you build any of these subdivisions. And you need the big picture right up on the table before you start designing those roads. You don't want to find out in the middle of a road that someone's really concerned that this was an important cultural site. You want to do it up front. And so there's been this tug of war. The HP said, well, we'll do it later. Well, we've heard that before. We heard that in 2008. OHA beneficiaries, organizations like Sierra Club, community organizations like Maui Meadows Neighborhood Association would like to see a good job done now before the master plan goes to the Planning Commission, which is the next and last public step for this project. So next slide, please. So what's missing from this plan that we're concerned about? We've been told by some people, wow, you should be thrilled. You guys have said for years there were more sites. Look, there's hundreds of more sites now, thousands of more parts of site complexes that are called features. And what's missing? Well, first of all, the northern part of the land has always gotten the short shift. There was only one archaeological site found there. And it's 478 acres. So finally, after the new survey, there were 74 more sites found. However, citizens, cultural users, Dr. Schaaf, other archaeologists have seen additional sites there. And yet we have an accepted AIS that says no sites need to be preserved and there's only 75 there. Well, this area is known as Peahu. And Peahu is what Hawaiians call, what we call Wailea. So Wailea was built in the days before very much archaeological review in the 70s and late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so most of Peahu's history is gone. It's just been wiped out by the building of Wailea Resort. So we have a nice economic base, but our history is gone. So this is one of the last remaining Hawaiian places in Peahu that really should not have 0 sites protected. So next slide. So we went from 0 sites when the preservation plan for this area, based on the AIS that was missing sites all over the place, when the preservation plan was reviewed by State Historic, they said, you got to preserve something in the north. You were going to do data recovery on 6 sites. Why don't you preserve them instead? So a preservation plan came out that's saying 6 of 75 sites are going to be preserved. Well, that's kind of funny because during that same time, an agreement had been reached, a settlement agreement, among several citizens groups and the HP folks, including Sierra Club and Maui Unite, that about 18 sites were going to be preserved in the north. And these sites aligned with the gulches. Here's a picture of a gulch. There's beautiful gulches throughout the north, bluestone gulches. And somehow, even though that settlement was all signed, sealed, and delivered, and the county was a signatory on it, and everyone's a signatory on it, in October of 2016, we had a plan that went to State Historic that was missing all those preserved sites. So we now have official preserved plan that everybody refers to, that these poor archaeologists for the wind farm referred to, couldn't find any, for the solar farm, couldn't find where any of the sites were. And this map and this plan doesn't show that at least 18 plus 6, one site overlapped, so 25 sites are supposed to be preserved. But no one would know it. There's no official document that says that. All right, maybe that can be fixed. Maybe a new map could be issued. But basically, you have a report that just says there's no need. It's crazy. You should have one thing that has continuity, that has the same story. And in order to have a real satisfaction of Condition 26 that says, have a preservation plan that's accepted by State Historic and accepted by OHA, you're really going to need to show what's really there in the north, what's really there in the south, and what should really be preserved in the north and what should really be preserved in the south. Next slide, please. This is just a map to show you. I'm not making this up. This is from the settlement agreement. So a map existed in 2016 that could have been forwarded to State Historic. Was not. It showed the precise location of I think it was, this was 15 of the sites, and then 3 more were on another map because they were preserved in the buffer with Maui Meadows. Next slide. All right, you guys are on. This is about the north.
Go ahead and do that one in American.
Okay.
In the interest of time.
All right, in the interest of time. One of the things about the northern sites is this is our legacy of Peahu. It's a whole important ahupua'a. and only one short site visit was offered by means of quote-unquote consultation. It was limited to 4 people, and we visited about 8 sites of the 75 sites. And it was promised we would come back, but it never happened. Next slide, please. During that site visit, folks who were there, the Kanaka folks who were there, wanted to bring attention to certain areas that they thought were important. But the archaeologists just had no interest in that. This is an area that was thought to be important. This is a feature that has some stack rocks and then some upright rocks on it. It happens to lie along what USGS maps call as the Ahupua'a boundary between 2 land divisions, the Ahupua'a of Palawea and the Ahupua'a of Paiahu. So this is where Paiahu begins. But this site was overlooked. And so it doesn't exist on any maps. It doesn't exist in any recording. It's just, there's a map that says there's nothing there. OHA beneficiaries and others just feel that the location of this, it should really be part of a preserve strategy for the North. Next slide, please. This is just to show you the map of where this site is located. It's where the circle is, and that line is USGS's Ahupua'a boundary. So, strangely enough, this is where this site lines up, and there's several other sites along the same line that also appear to have cultural modification and are very unusual. None of them are recorded. So this is just information that's missing from a document that's going to be the go-to document for everybody. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. This is for Jean. This is for Dr. Shade, because this is her map. Jean, you want to speak to this map and how it got created? I'll turn my thing off.
Hello, am I muted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you, Dr. Shafe.
Oh, hi. Thanks. I can tell you these are just one site visit where we mapped sites that haven't been recorded, and so you can see the that they do exist in the north section where you remember the slide that Daniel talked to. It was the aerial view of the parcel, and it had so many dots on the right side and hardly anything on the whole northern parcel. This is a piece of that, and this is where the Ahupua'a boundary went. So this whole area is pretty much has no sites recorded, but yet it abuts that area to the right where you saw all the dots just crowded. And so that's a very unlikely settlement pattern. Yes, it's possible that there are fewer sites in that entire north parcel, but seriously, given that the radiocarbon dates say people were there as early as 1200 AD and were there several hundred years, it's very unlikely that the sites have been recorded in the northern parcel, that the ones that have been recorded don't reflect the original settlement pattern. And that's the whole point of the archaeological inventory survey, is to record places of prior human use. I wanted to say too that kind of painful to me is how the cultural input from knowledgeable people was ignored in the archaeological reports that have been produced. Sites are described very clinically as a stone mound or a stone platform, or and yet cultural users were aligning some of these things with important events having to do with the stars and seasons and warfare and very spiritual events, and none of that's included. And a very important last step after you find sites and you assess the meaning, the importance of a site is you have to sort of understand the relationships of this feature with that feature, and then you make that hard decision: do we destroy it? And so I don't know. I just feel as though the surveys have been inadequate in the north part, especially, and that listening to the people presenting here today, Lucienne and Daniel and Claire and others, that part is totally missing from understanding the true meaning of these sites. And as an archaeologist, I look at what's been written about Polynesia and the development of the Hawaiian political state, the significance and the importance of this place is just astounding in terms of helping us understand the importance of biodiversity and preserving that, and trying to understand how they sustained a huge population for hundreds of years in this marginal area. They figured it out, and there's a lot to be learned through the citizen science and other research that's in the soil, that the plant remains. How did they grow enough to feed their population? I just can't stress enough how impressed I am at the importance of the area.
Next slide, please.
Next slide. So this is me with Kumu Michael. Go back one slide, please. This is me and Michael Kumu Lee on a site visit to the northern part of the project area, 2014. It's the only site visit that we had to share our mana'o and ike about the sites, and we only saw a few of them, 7 or 8 out of 75 sites. But the point I want to make about consultation is that it is a required part of the historic review process, consulting with interested and knowledgeable parties about site identification and recordation, about site evaluation for significance and treatment of historic properties in a good faith and appropriate manner is in the Hawaii revised rules for archaeological inventory surveys. So this is how I'm going to summarize the consultation that occurred for this project. If you can think of the AIS as a movie, and those who were consulted as either actors or script writers for that movie, when the movie finally came out, most of what was provided by the script writers, the Kanakas, ended up on the editing floor. It did not make it to the text of the AIS, especially with regards to the significance of sites. It ended up in the credits, in the appendix, in the very back, outside the body of the AIS. And so if you ask any of us who were consulted, we felt disrespected because our comments on site significance or site, something being a site or a feature, was not, I think, appreciated. Was not. It didn't follow what is said in the rules, considering views of consulting parties in a good faith and appropriate manner. And so I think that's one of the big problems with the archaeological inventory survey, that it did not take the views of those of us who gave our mana'o on site significance seriously. And it did not make it into the movie. It got cut. So, thank you. Next slide, please.
So what you're seeing is a site that will be not preserved.
This is a beautiful site that has a lot of archaeological significance. It has artifacts, it has a hearth. It had some subsurface testing that showed that it had traditional use from, the time of Hawaiian traditional culture, kukui shells and stone tools and things like that. But it's in evidently the wrong location. And even though cultural users say, gosh, we use this for cultural purposes, it's on the list to be destroyed.
So one of the things that I wanted to make a point of, speaking of Kumu Michael Lee, is this is one of the places that he really liked. And the sites on this land inspired him to use his knowledge as a star priest, Papakila Hoku, and to create a map relating the stars and the land below and the life of the people. In the map, it shows the connectivity of this land and the people who lived here. It shows seasons of when you would grow, where on this land would you grow for best results. This map relies on the sites that are found and recorded, because instead of taking his own sites, he used the sites that were prepared and identified so that he could bring some semblance of, well, what do these sites mean? What do these 400 sites mean? What do the 1,000 features mean? And he did it. He worked for weeks and weeks, day and night, to create this map and to bring the story of this place. And yet, it is not used for site significance. His knowledge is not regarded as being as important as some person who is not from here, or is not Kanaka, who is not trained in a deeply, highly scientific, traditional field. And yet, significance was not given to us, to Kumuli, to help to make sense of this place, and so that for the future we will all know what this meant. We have not been given that chance to do that, and this is a real problem for us on consultation. The consultation that was done was so poorly reported, and it was never disclosed fully how and what we were consulting for. But we gave a lot of information, especially Kumuli, that was not utilized in determination.
Next slide, please. So now we're switching over to the South. What's missing in the South? Well, we have overlooked sites that were never recorded. We have decommissioned endangered sites, which we refer to as bulldozer bait, because they're just sites that even though they exist and we're aware of them and they got recorded and some of them are really cool places, they're just likely going to be destroyed because they're not on anybody's maps, and the GPS points for them are wrong. So the archaeological consultants don't really know where they're located. Then we have mislocated sites where the GPSs are so wrong that they're on maps and they're on the map in the completely wrong location. So where they are shows a blank, and then where they aren't shows a site. And then we have quote-unquote insignificant sites, which have a lot of meaning to cultural users, but are just said by some archaeologists to be insignificant. They're categorized as ag features, And when we take cultural users there, they go, there's no way this is an ag feature. Here's what would happen on this kind of site. Here's what it'd be used for. Next slide, please. And our goal is to not have any insignificant sites, not have any missing sites or decommissioned sites. This is just a quick map that we threw together. These little pink dots, this is an actual map that is from the preservation plan. And maybe there's been an updated preservation plan. We are all supposed to receive these, but of course we haven't. So we're doing our best. But this is from the most current preservation plan that we had, the one that was accepted by State Historic. And there's a big blank area in this part. The 134-acre preserve is the purple line. But there's supposed to be other preserves that are between that and the dotted line, which is a big stone wall. And those pink dots represent sites that we know where they are. We have pictures of them. We've been out there with project archaeologists. We've been out there with Dr. Schaaf. They're real sites, but they just don't exist on a map that everyone is using as the preserve map. And then the two circles are the insignificant sites, sites that were said to be so insignificant that they can be destroyed, but they actually were never fully mapped, so the archaeologists don't know what's really there, and there's some really different stuff there. Next slide, please. This is just an example of one of the sites. It was located on a map that we forced, as part of the settlement agreement, a map to be created that had all the decommissioned missing sites relocated on it. But of course, they were many of them were in the wrong location. They just used the points they had. This was one of the sites. It's located about 200 feet away from, or more, from where it was shown on the map. But because it's in the middle of a house lot now, and Mr. Jenks told us, well, no, we're not going to have any sites in the house lot. We'll do the boundaries differently, but that's not what happened. We have house lots that have sites all over them. So the whole idea of the house lots and the site area coexisting may really need to be rethought. Next slide, please. This is a map from a boundary walk, and Jean, you may want to chime in on this. There's little blue dots on this map. There's about 16 of them. As part of our settlement, the Sierra Club Maui Unite settlement, we got to walk the proposed boundary to see if any sites were being left in, left off, incorrectly. And that walk was an eye-opener. It took a couple of sessions. But what we saw was that, wow, there's a lot of sites that were never recorded here that are in plain view. We had archaeologists with us. We had an archaeologist from the HP consultant, and we had Dr. Schaaf as well. And we had all of us amateur archaeologists. And we saw at least 16 areas that were unrecorded sites. Now, supposedly the boundary is going to be adjusted, but those sites have never been mapped. How will people know where to adjust the boundary? They have like a point. A site is not a point. It's a structure, and it's some related structures that may be part of it. So we really want a new plan that shows all this stuff that we've found in the 5 years since the AIS was approved. Next slide, please. This is one of the examples of an insignificant site. So this site was recorded as an ag feature. It said it was like a little outcrop that had a few stones filled in on it. Well, this part of the site was never seen. There's a house platform there, which is on the right. There's a shrine area with stones arrayed around a large upright stone, which is a traditional shrine. The consulting archaeologist for HP, who accompanied on this, is sitting on a rock in the right-hand picture. He absolutely agreed that all these things had been missed. But, of course, he didn't write the report. So we have an accepted report, an accepted preservation plan. This ain't on it. No one knows it exists, and it's in the middle of a house lot. So why don't we just start and do it right? Next slide, please. this is an example of a mislocated site, and Gene Schaaf was nice enough to do the GPS points for both the location where all the maps show. This is a very substantial site on the right. It's a stone platform, and it was actually preserved because it's thought it's a possible burial. It's a typical type of a place that would be used for a traditional burial. But whether it's a traditional burial or whether it's a ceremonial site for, ag ceremonies, it's very substantial and very special. And the pink circle says is where all the preserved maps and adopted maps show that where it is. And the green circle is where it's actually located. And we have tried to correct this. We've sent the earlier maps for the project for Wailea 670 had it in the right location, and then somehow the GPS coordinates got off, and they just never corrected it. We don't know why there's such a pushback, but we'd just like to see the whole report corrected and have one thing that's really a solid guide for all future development. Next slide, please. This is an actual map that comes from the CRPP. And I don't know, Daniel, you want to talk to this a little bit? All right. Condition 13 says that there needs to be a cultural resources preservation plan, and it needs to be reviewed by State Historic and OHA, and it needs to be adopted by the Cultural Resources Commission of Maui. So this was a map from the CRPP. And you see, like, this map has a big blank spot right above the word cultural there. And that's where all those little pink dots were. So it's missing a lot of sites. And it was presented to the CRC, and none of us were there. It was a day when we all had other things to do. And, of course, we were not informed by the developer that it was going there.
We didn't know about it. The CRS, Cultural Resources Commission, reviewed the CRPP on March 2018. Chair Sablas, Lori, was surprised that there was no one there to testify, and you just assumed that is because the developers had done just such a good job in their outreach to the community. There was no testimony at all. The real reason is none of us knew that the plan was going to be before the CRPP, and so we weren't there to testify. And I think it was highly likely if we had been there to testify, the plan would not have been adopted. Because as I said before, the CRPP is based on the integrity of the Archaeological Inventory Survey, and the Archaeological Inventory Survey lacks integrity. So the CRC really looked at an incomplete, Cultural Resource Commission really looked at an incomplete cultural resource preservation plan. And that doesn't do service to the community, and it doesn't do service to the cultural resources that this plan is supposed to help protect. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's one of your conditions of zoning. It's been crossed off. It said, well, we took it to the Cultural Resources Commission. It was approved. But when I glanced at the transcripts, one of the questions asked was, are there any ceremonial sites outside of the preserve area? And the answer from the archaeologist was no. Well, that's absolutely not true. There are several significant sites that are not in that 134-acre preserve. They're in other preserves, but there just wasn't adequate information given, and we don't feel that Condition 13 was actually honestly fulfilled, and it should be revisited. Next slide, please, and we're ending up here. Thank you for your patience. So our conclusions are that the reports that were required by Conditions 13 and 26 are all based on this inaccurate and flawed AIS, which is accepted, quote unquote, and therefore all these reports have the same missing, mislocated, overlooked, insignificant archaeological sites. Because we lack this information, these sites are at risk, and this cannot be made right by some future promised archaeological report for each development action. It should be made right now. The intention of these conditions was, hey, we don't have the developer have complete reports now. We'll let them have their rezoning because they're going to do these reports. Well, that time is now. Phase 2 project district approval is the next and last step where the public will be involved, the last point that any of us can be heard. And we want these reports to actually show what's really there before this happens, so that the roads and the sewer lines and the lots and everything else that's going to happen can be laid out, and they can truthfully say no harm will happen to significant cultural sites. So we thank you guys for your patience. Last slide, and we just want to remind you how important this place is to the hundreds and hundreds of people who have visited over the years on cultural accesses, on Sierra Club educational hikes, on educational hikes arranged with other groups. This is a place where people can easily go. They can easily drive, they can easily park, they can easily walk. There are trails, and it's easy to step back in time and see our history, and it's thrilling for people. So we're asking that your committee would make sure this project does not skip a complete archaeological review one more time. And if you would reach out to the county archaeologist and ask if they could review what the reports that we have and citizen concerns, and recommend to State Historic if an updated AIS and preservation plan are needed. Because OHA is feeling that more is needed, people in the community are feeling that more is needed, and it's the county's responsibility to enforce these conditions. We also feel that the CRC really should get another look at this, because they were not given really the real information, and how could they know? Since no one from the public was there, it's sad, but unfortunately they didn't get the whole story. So last slide. Oh, Penny, you want to step in?
Places like Honua'ula are one of the last Hawaiian places that hold our history, our cultural history and our natural history. It's one of those places where you can walk around and actually see this history right before your eyes. And that's what makes it so special. Next slide, please. So at the time, Councilmember Mike Victorino said that the community would hold the project accountable and make sure that it would be Pono. Well, we have many community organizations, some of which are listed here, many individuals, OHA beneficiaries, many Hawaiians over the last 12, 13 years or so have held the developers accountable and have maka'ala. We have been vigilant. So we thank you, council members, for giving us the time, so much time. Sorry for taking so much time, but thank you for hearing us. Appreciate the time you've given us, the respect. Mahalo nui loa, and mahalo. We are pow with our presentation and happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. And members, I know we're a little bit past our morning break. Do folks need a break, or do they want to power through? Member King.
Yeah, I'd like to power through if everybody's okay with that. This is our only item, and I don't want to. I want to stay on track with what we just heard and where we're going from here. But it's, if everybody needs to take a break,
Okay.
I'm ready with questions.
Chair Lee.
Madam Chair, I just wondered, what did you have in mind? I know we're not taking action on this, but besides taking questions from the members, did you have something else you wanted to offer?
I did want to ask Court Counsel, this is a very good presentation, and I just was wondering if the council can introduce an amendment to the conditions and deem the AIS insufficient and request all corrections be made, especially now that we have an in-house expert, Dr. Janet Six, clearly the processes and procedures have failed in protecting antiquities that the presenters have pointed out. Luckily, there's still time as the bulldozers haven't come in yet. So I just was wondering that question of Corp Council if us as a council could request an updated AIS with all of these corrections being made. As I'm not sure. I know one of the Halemua got its change in zoning reverted for not meeting the conditions, where it seems like Honua'ula Partners is making effort to meet the conditions, but there's some discrepancy to whether those conditions have been met. So I that was my question for Corporation Council, if we can amend the conditions to say that we're not satisfied with the AIS, and we'd like how Ms. Dene presented all the requirements to be, in one place, comprehensive. That would be what I wanted to find out, but I was thinking, as we have about an hour and 10 minutes, we can go through a few rounds of questions, maybe start out with 3 minutes each and go from there. And if members do need to pause for the,
or do they need a break?
if members need to pause for the cause, they can just, use their break as necessary. And we only need 4 members for a quorum. So if we get into danger of that, then we may need to. So if that's the case, then I can put 3 minutes on the clock. And for anybody that is being asked the question, the members have 3 minutes. And so if you can try to stay on point of the question so that they can get the most of their time. We probably have time for more than one round. I'll start off with my vice chair, Member Sinensi, and then go to the area rep, Member King. Member Sinensi, are you ready?
Mahalo, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and get Mr. Ferreira's input as far as having, I know Director McLean mentioned about having OHA be part of this conversation, and so if OHA has these same issues with the AIS.
Okay, Mr. Ferreira, Kamakana Ferreira.
Hi, I'm here. I'm happy to answer that question.
Awesome.
The Office of Hawaiian Affairs over the years has been pretty consistent with our critiques about the AIS. We've provided written comments on the preservation plan when it was first made available to us a couple of years ago. And we noted concerns regarding the AIS, particularly GPS points, lack of cultural information, and lack of, missing sites, basically. And so we have always been an advocate for having that corrected. There's been a steady reluctance to do any additional archaeological work from Honua'ula Partners. Their first proposed fix was to include an AIS errata sheet because we had noted a lot of discrepancies in their AIS, like wrong site numbers, wrong site significance, and so this errata was produced. But they never addressed the failure to include proper GPS points or the inclusion of cultural information and the missing sites that we've seen and the community has shared with us. So we've been consistent in that. And one way to possibly fix it, we were hoping to have this fixed through the Section 106 process, which was reinitiated towards the end of this year. But unfortunately, due to the new surveys that were done, they'll be pulling out of the Section 106 process. So that avenue is not available to us anymore yet anyway. OHA does certainly have concerns about them withdrawing from that and them breaching commitments that were made to the environmental impact statement. And we will write to the county about that. But in terms of getting back to your question about the AIS work. So another fix that Honua'ula Partners has proposed is that they condition doing more GPS work and more site identification as part of the preservation plan. Now, yes, that's certainly one way of doing it, but as the community folks have pointed out, there's little confidence that they'll carry this out as promised given their track record. And if given the opportunity to do a supplemental AIS, OHA would totally support that. I think that would probably be the best case scenario. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Mr. Ferreira. And then really quickly, so the Section 106 consultation, is that due to federal funds as part of the project?
Well, they were going to apply for an incidental take permit for the taking of a few endangered species.
And that initiates the 106.
That's correct. So initially, through bad advice from their archaeological contractor, who had said that Section 106 consultation was completed, basically what he was doing was using the 6E consultations and trying to say that was Section 106 consultations when they're two totally separate things. They can be used together, but the consulting parties need to be informed about that, and they weren't. So OHA inquired with the Advisory Council of Historic Preservation and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and when they reviewed this information, I think about November 2019, they concluded that there was an error made and they needed to do Section 106. And so they went ahead and initiated it at the beginning of 2020. And then I guess Honua'ula Partners didn't like that. So they did a new survey to try and get them out of needing to do an incidental take permit and trying to say that there's no endangered or critical habitat present.
Mahalo, Mr. Ferreira. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ferreira. Okay, Member King, I'm going to start your clock. Ready and go.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So I guess my first question is for Lucien and or Daniel, but I first wanted to thank you so much for the presentation and just tell Daniel, please don't apologize for taking our time because this is like such important information and I really appreciate the citizens doing this type of work and following up on holding developers accountable. So thank you, and no apologies necessary. But my first question is, were there any deadlines discussed when you folks were in your lawsuit were coming up with this agreement and the conditions that you put into the agreement? Were there any deadlines on when these things were supposed to have happened or any sequential listing?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of deadlines about certain conservation measures. For instance, the original proposal to build a deer fence was that it would start at the start of construction, but as a result of our settlement, we worked that back that a deer fence would need to be constructed within 6 months of the Phase 2 approval from the Planning Commission. So our hope was to get a deer fence, quicker than later. There are many other things like that had timelines, like the inspecting of the boundary lines needed to happen before this went to the Planning Commission.
Okay. And then what about
tagging of sites needed to happen, but not updated information.
And what about the condition 20 on the water quality reports?
Well, the water quality condition, what we did in the settlement is just in case those conditions would be attempted to be reversed by the consul, we put about 10 of the conditions in our settlement agreement that the two citizens groups could actually try to enforce. Now, that would take a lot of money, but at least the thought was there. And one of those was condition 20, but we had no deadlines for them to get the report. We knew at that time they weren't getting the reports in, and we would come to these compliance review meetings and we would testify to it, but we were ignored. There were different council members with different priorities.
Okay, thank you for those answers. And, I had some other questions, Chair, but from the developers who are not here. But I would like to can I ask a question of Corp Counsel and or planning? because really the big question here is what are the council's options? How long are we supposed to wait before the rezoning is reversed due to the fact that conditions are not met? Is there maybe we could get Director McLean to answer that, and then if there's legal issues, maybe Corp Counsel can answer that. Like, this is how we're supposed to be holding developers accountable to their conditions, and if we just keep letting it go on and on, I'm afraid that's the precedent we're setting for every other developer. And why are we even making conditions? So, is there like a timeline, Director McLean, where we just say you haven't met these conditions, or maybe even deliberately, falsified information, and so therefore the zoning is reversed, the rezoning.
Director McLean, and that was 3 minutes. So yeah, go ahead, Director.
I think it would be important to get Corp Counsel's input as well. There is a provision in the county code that talks about conditional zoning, so I can consult that in just a second. Mike Hopper might be able to give you a more accurate reading from that.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Hopper?
I do want to add, though, excuse me, Chair, that when we talk about reverting approvals, that's typically when there's been no performance whatsoever. In this particular case, it does seem to me that the applicant has been working on these conditions since the zoning was approved. Now, you may disagree with how they have fulfilled them, and I understand that. I heard the presentation today, but that doesn't mean that they've just been sitting on the entitlements, if you will. So I think that would come into play, and I'm sure that the applicant's representative would make a case for the time and effort that they've spent fulfilling those conditions or working to fulfill the conditions does count for something. If Mr. Hopper can talk about the provision in the code, that's great. If not, I can look it up and try to give an answer on that.
Mr. Hopper, thank you. Director McLean.
There are a lot of potential issues if you're talking about reverting zoning of a property, but the wording in the council or in the code is in 19.5.10.050 F. It says failure to fulfill any conditions on a zone change within the specified time limitations may be grounds for the enactment of ordinances to restore the zoning to the previous zoning district or initiate a claim on the bond. That would be in the event that they have bonded improvements. There's a variety of other enforcement mechanisms. They can be fined for not meeting a condition under 19.530.030, as well as there's a discussion of the conditions being enforced by a lawsuit. So the county could commence a lawsuit to require the conditions to be fulfilled. Again, this all deals with the issue of whether there's been a breach of conditions, so that would need to be established. Also, reverting the property back after an approval has been granted may have a substantial amount of legal issues. There's a Hawaii Supreme Court case called the Bridge Wailea case, and that deals with the Land Use Commission attempting to revert a property back to its previous designation, and the court stated that could not be done in that particular case. So doing that has a lot of very serious legal issues involved in it, and so we would need to look at that very carefully before doing it. But that is the wording in the code. Again, I don't want to get into specifics with this project without doing a very thorough review of it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well. And, I guess the specified time that was in that part of the code that you just quoted, it might be the issue, and maybe somebody else will ask about that. What does that mean? What is the specified time for this project? Because that was, and to me, Chair, this the zoning really doesn't happen until you meet those conditions. So I don't even really look at it as a reversal. I just look at it as an incomplete fulfillment, and so then it would go back to the original zoning because the zoning was only granted with those conditions. Thank you.
Okay. And Member Molina, you ready for your opportunity? Ready and go.
All right, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, yeah, like Member King, I'm kind of disappointed a developer or representative was not here because I had questions for the developer. But I don't know if any of the panel can answer this. Now, with the discovery of these additional sites, and this was a 1,500 unit project, so now with these additional 74, 75 sites, how many proposed homes were going to be on these sites? Because now it looks like the whole plan for the home sites is going to be altered. Can anyone answer that? And again, who did the archaeological study for the record?
I believe it was SCS, Scientific Consultants. There's an item on Granicus. I think it's the 2015 update of the it's like 870 pages. But as far as the sites, yeah, I think that would be a question for the developer unless any of our resources wanted to take a stab at it.
So we can.
Okay.
Yeah, for many of the sites in the northern 2/3 of the project area, in discussions with the developer, we looked at passive preservation of sites that would not impact development, like sites that would be in the gulches, for example, sites that would be in the proposed 116-foot boundary between Maui Meadows and the project. And there are a couple of long fingers that are part of the boundaries between the two the Maui Meadows and Honua'ula. So many of those sites are within areas that are not proposed for development, and so would not impact, homes that were being built in the area. But those sites are. We would like to see, since those sites are in a passive preservation because they're in gulches and boundary areas, to be included in the archaeological inventory survey as sites that will be preserved. Yeah, and go beyond the passive preservation and include them in the document. And then that would be included in the CRPP, Culture Resource Preservation Plan, and would be included in the Preservation Mitigation Plan. So, Luciana, did you want to add more to that?
I'll add a little bit about the number of units. So the original plan as proposed in 2008 was 1,400 units, of which there were going to be half affordable and half market. And then it was decided that 250 of those would actually be built off-site in the Honua'ula area. That plan changed. You folks approved a different plan for that condition. So all the affordable, less affordables are needed now. Only about 300 affordables are needed. They'll all be built on site, and the total number of units that the developer is planning is 1,150, even with all the preserves that are being talked about now. So there is a somewhat of a reduction from the 1,400, but that's been planned for a long time. And frankly, I think it's based more on water because the project has to create its own water supply and it has to treat the water with reverse osmosis. So it seems like this is more living within a water budget than just a how many preserves we have. If additional areas were preserved, it would seem very likely that the number of units would not change, hugely. It's not like you go from 1,150 units and now it's like 200. It would be maybe, 50 units less or 100 units less, something like that, which might also make sense for water.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Chair, I have a follow-up question at a later point. I guess my 3 minutes are up for this round, but when you do another round, I have a couple more questions. Thank you.
I'll be sure to try get another few rounds in there. Member Lee, you ready for your 3 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just concerned like everybody else. It's hard to have a two-way discussion when one party is missing from the table. It sounds more and more like this project is unlikely to get off the ground. So I'm wondering, how much time should we spend on this if it's never even going to, if it's not going to be feasible? It's been 2008 I wasn't on the council at that time, but that's, probably, it's 12 years and nothing's really happened. And the world is not in a better shape, for large scale development. I'm just wondering if this is even feasible anymore. But may I have a question? I have a question for Ms. McLean, the director, if you don't mind. Director? Hi, Director, can you tell me, have you been in touch with the developers, up until lately, or, has there just been radio silence?
We have been in touch with them. The main focus of our interactions with them lately has been on Condition 26. That's the historic resource preservation plan that needs the approval of both OHA and SHPD. As I mentioned earlier, we're the go-between. So just trying to work out that process. And that's been going on for well over a year, probably a couple of years, with different changes that were required from either agency. So that's been the end of our interaction. We were very surprised to hear that Mr. Jenks had retired. We heard that the same time the committee did. I don't know if that was sudden or when that happened. And they are, what they've indicated to us is that they are looking to get a new project manager on board and up to speed.
Has the ownership of the project changed hands over time?
Not to my knowledge, but I wouldn't necessarily know if it had.
Okay. And one last question. Do you think this project is still feasible?
I do. It's still going to take a bit of work.
A miracle.
And more commitment to the issues that have been raised. But
okay.
I do think it's possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director McLean. Thank you, Charlie. Member Rollins Fernandez, you ready? Okay, go.
Mahalo, Chair. And mahalo to our community volunteers for their very thorough and enlightening presentation. Like my colleagues before me, I would have had some questions for the developer. So it's unfortunate they're not here. I would be supportive of some of your recommendations, Chair. Your recommendations were specific to the AIS only, or did they also include studies on water quality?
For me, it was mostly the AIS. The water quality, I have the reports up to 2012, so I didn't really look in from 2012 to 2020 why there weren't. I gotta jump back into that. But for the highway issue, it seems like, if they were here and we could have a conversation, it's possible that one could be resolved. But with them not being here, that is a problem. I do find it kind of hard to believe that they would drop the ball like this with such a big project and us having conversations with them right up until Monday. Yeah, I mean, we can, if you guys want to compile your questions in writing and send them to the committee, and then we can pass them on to the developer, and I guess, the saga continues.
So I just have one question regarding the 1,400 units that were planned. How many of them were constructed or none?
Director McLean, would you know the answer to that question?
I don't believe hasn't been any construction on site.
Okay, so it was just 1,400 plan, and then it's been reduced to 1,100. with some of the affordable housing being planned for off-site. Okay, I just need a clarification.
The original plan was for it to be off-site, but the relatively recent amendment that they got allows for it to be on-site. Because off-site, they were looking at the Pi'ilani Promenade location, and that went the way that it went. So they wanted the option of doing those on-site.
Mahalo for that clarification. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Let me stop the. Okay, I'll just take a few minutes for my questions. Dr. Six, if I can ask my questions of you for the first round, I'll start the timer. So my first question are you familiar with this Honua'ula project, Dr. Six?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I became aware of this site back in 2008. I did numerous site visits when I was working at the university, Maui College. Very familiar with the site. I read the majority of the AIS, and I have some serious concerns about it. I agree with the presenters. There's been some issues, and one of them is we do a lot of quantification and not a lot of qualification. So we count things, but we don't assign meaning to them. And meaning is really the brass ring in archaeology. If you can figure out what it meant, if you can, get information from lineal cultural descendants and cultural practitioners, that's invaluable. So I saw that was put at the end, as Daniel mentioned. Also, GPS standards have changed with SHPD. They're now requiring us to use sub-meter GPS units. In my discussions with Andrew McAllister, oftentimes people were using their phones, and you can get a wild swing if you don't have enough satellites on a GPS and you need a tighter tolerance. So I also have never heard of a decommissioned site, and I Googled it, and I can't come up with anything about a decommissioned archaeological site. I think archaeoastronomy is a burgeoning field, and that's what Michael Lee, as a Kumu, brought to this project, is he tried to orient the stars to the artifacts and ecofacts and features and sites. And there was a book that came out in May of 2019 by Pat Kirsch called Heiau Ainalani, and in the adjacent area of Kanaio and Hikinui, they used remote sensing, and they were able to identify 78 shrines within the ag field. So oftentimes when we parse things out in the AIS as agricultural or habitation, you fail to see the interconnectivity that Michael Lee did see. So I do agree that there was this kind of a footnote in the back, and it's interesting because I did go to a meeting at Goodfellow Brothers when I was part of the Sierra Club in 2014, and I actually said exactly what Daniel said, is that always ends up as a footnote, and indeed it did. So I think moving forward, remote sensing is the way these surveys should be done. I've talked about LiDAR drones. We have, Aina Archaeology is using one very effectively. Because we have human error, when sites are overgrown, you go there on a dry time, you're going to see more sites than when you go on an over, and especially you got Lantana, and you're walking around trying to see. And it's not a completely easy, it's an easy access site, but Lucian, it is a lot of loose rocks, and so there's a lot of stuff missing. But I saw white coral. I saw branching white coral. And in one site alone, they have 70 pieces of unworked branching white coral. That's ceremonial. I asked Michael Dega, the principal investigator of SCS, if they did any white coral dating. It's thorium-uranium dating. It's a form of radiometric dating, and they did not. And so there's numerous sites with coral. I saw this coral myself, so I think there's a need for the AIS to be reviewed again.
Thank you, Dr. Six. Second round, Vice Chair Sinensi. I'll start the timer.
Hello, Chair. This question is for Director McLean, and just for clarification. So it looks like the northern section, the 478 acres, is that where the housing was supposed to be, and then the southern 192 acres is where the preservation plan was. If I remember correctly, Mr. Jenks said that the bulk of the preservation plan was going to be on the southern section. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And then if Mr. Kanahele wanted to add anything to that question.
Well, the southern section, which has a high concentration of documented sites, and where much of the rare Hawaiian lowland dry forest remnant is located, much of that will be a native plant preservation area, and those be some preserve areas. But shockingly, as it may seem, they do plan to build homes within that highly sensitive area in that one third south section. There are plans, and that's our concern because some of the homes that are on the map, there are sites, we believe that there are sites within the areas where homes are going to be built because of issues with actual location of where the sites are. So I think we may be on different pages as to where sites are actually located as far as the 2015 AIS and now the proposed preservation plan is concerned, and what is actually ground truth as we hike these areas. Lucianne, did you want to add something?
That's true, and for facts and figures, we've been told about 40 house sites are planned in the southern 192 acres. They'd be, probably the half acre to third acre type of larger sites, but those are planned, and the infrastructure to serve them, the roads and sewers and so forth, would need to be installed as well. Very rugged lava terrain. This is a lava flow. It's like going to Haleakala.
Yeah, and Lucianne, I mean, it seems like Mr. Jenks was kind of the major part of this project, and now that he's retired, where do you see the future of this? I guess most of us, is this going to be revamped or taken over by somebody else?
Our guess would be that a partner in this project has been Goodfellow Brothers Pacific Construction, and our guess would be that someone would be brought in from Pacific Rim to take over as project manager.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sinanci. Member King.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, could we put a question out there for somebody connected with this project from the developer side, just to get an official statement on who the owner is. So it's not just the consultant or manager, but who actually owns this project. Because I was originally under the impression that Charlie Jenks had some financial stake in this property, but I don't know if that's true, and he's not here to ask him. And then my other question is for Director McLean. Just getting back to the issue of what Corp Counsel Hopper said as specified time that's mentioned in the code. So it sounds like the previous council did not put a specified time in their timeline for these conditions. But if we go forward, I mean, at some point, someone has to take responsibility for holding people accountable. I heard people talk about the county's responsibility, and we still don't seem to have a clear picture of whether that means the council or the county administration. However, the council was the one that granted the rezoning based on the conditions. So in my mind, it's the council that needs to rectify this. But if we go forward, is there a way to, if we ask for a new AIS and we have these other parameters on there, is a way to set a timeline on that it needs to be done and accepted by all the parties that need to accept it, including OHA, and within a certain time frame. So this thing doesn't just keep dragging on and taking everybody, sucks up a lot of the time of our citizens who could be actively putting this energy into other things, which a lot of them are anyway. But it just, I'm with Chair Lee that we just can't keep this going on and taking all of our time if it doesn't seem plausible. But I do think that the AIS is important because it also is going to affect things like the solar project. Whether or not there's a housing project, there's a pathway through that property for the solar project, and that cannot be stepping on some of these valued sites. That may happen before the project even breaks ground, and we need to know, what the actual sites are.
Mr. Hopper?
That was actually for Director McLean.
Sorry, Director McLean.
I'm not sure what the question was.
The question is, can we specify a time frame going forward if we give them another chance to do a corrected AIS? And then at the end of that time frame, if it's not done, then the conditions are not met and it reverts back to the original zoning.
I think the process would be that the council would initiate an amendment to the existing zoning ordinance to modify the conditions, and that would get processed the way that any council-initiated entitlement would be processed. And yes, zoning conditions can have time frames. You would tie them to milestones. I mean, it could be, a number of years, or it could be, a sequence of actions that would take place. I would just note that agency review can often take a long time. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're establishing those timeframes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Member King. Member Molina, you got those other questions? Oh, yeah. Wait, I'm sorry. It looks like Mr. Kamakana Ferreira raised his hand. Did you want to chime in on Councilmember King's question, Mr. Ferreira?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to raise awareness to the fact that the final environmental impact statement did set a project timeline of a 2/3 project build-out by 2018 and a full build-out by 2022. Now, I know this doesn't address the issue of a timeline for the rezoning condition, but it is a concern to OHA, and it is something that we will raise with the county, as the current rules for environmental impact statements, if there's a substantial change in project timing, there needs to be a consideration for a supplemental EIS. And considering that there's been a large amount of time that's passed, it is something to consider. And I think that also could affect any kind of rezoning timeline that's proposed in the future.
Okay, thank you so much for that input. I think that's really important statement there. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ferreira. Sorry about that, Member Molina. I got you queued up and ready. Go for it.
Okay, no worries. Just with regards to the water quality reports, how many have been completed, and have any of them been referred to the Department of Health? If you don't have that info now, that's fine. We can get that in writing. My question would be related to condition 27. It's been alleged that the developer is no longer participating in with the U.S. Forest and Wildlife on the Habitat Conservation Plan. Maybe for Mr. Kanahele or Ms. Dene, if the developer is not longer cooperating, do you have other recommendations for how the developer could meet this goal?
Boy, that's a great question, Councilmember Molina. Really, the gold standard is to cooperate with the agencies that have the expertise. And frankly, I know that HP will say, oh man, we've bent over backwards, we've tried everything. But other developments, like the wind farm in Oahe, did an extensive habitat conservation plan. It's done. It's been done, for years, and it was very thorough. But they admitted that they had biological resources. They admitted they had cultural resources. They did excellent cultural review. Their archaeologists said, there's a lot more. We want to do more cultural review. They had a different archaeological team. So you can have different outcomes depending on how well you really get the information you need. So I know that HP has been very frustrated with their process with Fish and Wildlife, but part of it was just trying to withhold information. It just makes it take a lot longer, and that's been the pattern here. So we would prefer that they just go back and get it done with Fish and Wildlife, like lots of other projects do. But there are projects on the Big Island where there are developers that have an agreement with Fish and Wildlife as well. It's not unheard of, but you need to do it right.
And may I just add the voluntary withdrawal of the incidental take license by the developer, which was the trigger for the 106 consultation process, kind of put things up in the air. Because we as Hawaiians were looking forward to resolving some of the issues we had with the Archaeological Inventory Survey and the preservation plan through this, federal 106 consultation process. It's a mechanism that helps. It's sort of like Ho'oponopono, you know, let's get together and try to work this out. Now that they've withdrawn their application and there's no 106 process, and we just learned about this fairly recently, we are trying to look for a path forward.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The bottom line is that if you don't have a process, you really have no accountability for whatever plan is adopted. So that's of concern to us.
Okay. Great. Thank you for both of your responses. It certainly makes sense. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure. And I have the water quality reports for 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Ms. Lillis, was there any reason why we didn't get from 2013 to the present day on the water quality reports that we requested? This we received on October 1st.
Chair,
Yes.
they did not include it in their response, so we can send a follow-up as well to request the outstanding reports.
Thank you. And Mr. Molina, it looks like Mr. Kamakana Ferreira has another answer for you as well. Go ahead, Mr. Ferreira.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to chime in on that question too. I mean, it certainly is possible to do an alternative, but I think it would be extremely difficult, and they'd have to amend the condition as well as mitigation commitments made in the environmental impact statement. It's my understanding that they did do a conservation and stewardship plan back in 2010, which was to address part of Condition 27. But the interesting thing is that in that plan, there are management objectives that said a habitat conservation plan needs to be completed. So if they're withdrawing from the HCP, then it's negating commitments they made to this plan and negating their completion of Condition 27. And it's also dangerous for the Honua'ula Partners because these commitments were also put into the EIS. So if there's a change in mitigation commitments, it's my understanding that's also warranting of the county reconsidering a supplemental EIS be completed. So it could be done, but it'd be extremely difficult and probably not effective.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina. Thank you, Mr. Ferreira. Councilmember Rollins Fernandez.
Hello, Chair. No more questions at this time.
Okay. I'll start my own clock on myself. This time my question would be, I guess, for Mr. Ferreira. Did you have other suggestion for how the consultation process on historic sites can be approved?
I don't fully understand. Yes, for our comment on how there could be a consultation process. I'm sorry.
Yeah, on the historic sites, I guess, you know, the ones that haven't been noted in their reports.
Well, I guess one way to do it would be through a supplemental AIS and then have a consultation component included as part of that. And I think given what we've heard from the community and what SHPD understands, that if there was to be a supplemental AIS, then there would definitely be a consultation component. Alternatively, if there isn't going to be a supplemental AIS and they're going to condition things in the preservation plan, then the community should have an opportunity to review and comment on the preservation plan, in addition to OHA and SHPD comments. And I think SHPD might be inclined to allow that to happen from correspondences I've been reading between Dr. Lebo and the attorneys from Honua'ula Partners.
Okay, thank you. So I'm interpreting that OHA supports the need to have an updated archaeological study and maps before it goes to the Planning Commission for approvals?
Yes, we would support that.
And do you have any concerns about the change in proposed native plant preserve?
From what I understand, I think the community would like to see part of it expanded, and that could come out of the additional supplemental AIS work. And as a suggestion to preserve some of those sites to effectively preserve some of the MPPA boundaries. So yes, we would support that.
Okay, thank you. And I see Dr. Altenberg would like to respond to that question as well. Dr. Altenberg?
Yes, I have some information on the legislative history of Condition 27. Now, I don't know if you can share slide 32 from the presentation again.
Ms. Lillis, can we share slide 32?
Yes, Chair, please stand by.
So you'll see when it comes up, there's that dotted line on the top, and then there's the purple line that marks the native plant preservation area. And that gap is my fault, the gap between those two lines.
The slide isn't up yet, but just a moment. Charlie?
No, I have a question, but not on this particular line of discussion.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Charlie. I skipped you.
It's
My
okay.
bad. That's okay. As soon as Dr. Altenberg finishes his answer, then Miss Lillis, did you have the slide 32 ready to share?
Yes, Chair. Thank you for waiting.
Sure thing.
Let's see. Not that one.
Oh.
It's the one. There we go. Okay. So that the dotted line on the top is actually this historic wall that demarks the change in habitat from the deep soil to the AKA. And you'll know, and a lot of the problems we are running into in terms of missing archaeological sites and is in the gap between that and the purple line, which is the conservation easement. And that gap was my fault because, so in the summer of 2007, Michelle Anderson contacted me while I was teaching in China that she had to come up with language for Condition 27 because the planning committee was about ready to pass the rezoning ordinance. And the best information that we had in terms of where this conservation area should be was based on a 1988 survey and then the waypoints that I gathered just through volunteering going through the property. I didn't know about the historic wall, and biologically and culturally, the site really should be demarked by that historic wall. So the area that I came up with and sent to Council Member Anderson was that purple line, and it left out all of this important area in that gap south of the historic wall. So if and we've been dealing with that error ever since. So the problem was the developer didn't do the comprehensive botanical survey until a few years after the rezoning was approved. And so, the zone Condition 27 didn't have adequate information when it was created. And I regret that gap. And I don't know what can be done to cure that problem, but really the preservation area should go up to that dotted line.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Altenberg. We'll see what we can do. Miss Lillis, if you can stop sharing screen at this time, and then I'll give Charlie her opportunity. Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just thinking that the conditions, although warranted, would probably make this project, no longer doable to me financially. So, was there an effort for both sides to work together in the sense that the lands that should be preserved be purchased by OHA or another entity, a nonprofit entity that perhaps the county could contribute to, so that there would be, sort of a win-win on both sides, and we would get some housing, and then the lands that should be preserved are set aside, and we don't have to wait and wait and wait. And because if this project never, goes forward, then that's a loss for those who want to preserve the culture and the sites and the special species that occupy these lands. So I was just wondering if, let's say, Mr. Ferreira, have you thought about buying some of the properties on this piece of Wailea 670? Forget the new name.
I'm certainly not in a position to answer that. I don't think there's ever been a discussion about OHA purchasing these parcels. Not to say that it's impossible, but I would have to raise it with the administration and probably have to go to our board. I would suggest maybe also thinking of other alternatives. I mean, OHA has had a moratorium on acquiring properties for a while, and given our budget.
Why would they do that?
Because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with acquiring land. There's land management. You got to make sure you have the proper resources to care for sites that are on your property, or if you're going to develop, to go through the proper entitlements. And so our land division has gone through a lot of overhauls to address management concerns on our own properties. So in short, I can't answer that question. Yeah. I'd have to take it back.
All right, thank you. Because, it's fine when you keep adding conditions and timelines on a project. But if it's never going to happen, why are we doing this? That's my question. So, a good project has to be financially sound, and it doesn't sound like it at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lee. I guess, for me perfect timing. To respond to your questions it was my understanding that they wanted to move forward and get to the Planning Commission. And so as a council and hearing out the community's presentation, that they had concerns before moving on to the next phase. I was hoping that this meeting would be the chance that we could bridge the gap between the community concerns and what the developer has presented. But I think we were all caught off guard that the developer, what had occurred in that unfortunate, I don't know if it's a miscommunication, but lack of due communication in a reasonable time frame, something. So I was hoping that this meeting would be the chance for us to bridge the divide between the community and the developer, but maybe we need to follow up. And if we wanted to send the correspondence to the developer, I know Ms. King already wanted to know who the actual owners are because she had thought Mr. Jenks was. Maybe we can have the members turn in written copies of the questions that they wanted to ask the developer, say by next week Friday, for us to compile and send it to them, and we can continue on this conversation. It didn't seem as though when Mr. Jenks presented that he was thinking that he wasn't able to move forward. It seemed like, that was the point of presenting the compliance report, because they did want to keep moving forward. So I think, the best thing for us to do is try to bridge the divide here. Member King.
Thank you, Chair. And I really appreciate the, the thought about bridging the divide. I think that's been tried. And I think that was the basis of the settlement by Maui Unite, was to bridge that gap of what was previously, agreed upon and didn't happen. And then they added some more conditions to try to make sure that some of these things happen. I've been at meetings of, annual meetings of the Maui Meadows Neighborhood Association for the last 4 years now. And the first one was, a kumbaya moment where, Charlie Jenks came and gave a report of all the things that he had done, and everybody was in support. And as the years progressed and none of this stuff happened, or some of the reports that came out were not accurate, And some people were not listened to, our experts in our community. We're gotten to this point where, how many chances do you continue to give somebody to meet their conditions before you just say, doesn't seem like a sincere effort. So I'm not making a judgment on whether it is a sincere effort, and I'm just saying that there are many in the community, and you heard it from Daniel Kanahele, who don't feel that way right now and are not sure, if we're going to ever get that accurate assessment, because the underlying purpose of that has to be that you really care about these things. You really care about the significance of these cultural sites. And I think that's what our community is feeling like. We're not getting that true concern for the significance of these cultural sites. So, we can keep trying to talk to people associated with this project, and once we find out who they are, but I just wanted to point out that was the intent of this community group when they went to court, and then they created that settlement agreement. And the things in that settlement agreement have not been, I've heard breach of contract, they've been breached. And so I just want us to all keep that in mind going forward, that this is, really giving the developer, if we do this, if we go forward, we want to give them one more chance to complete what the conditions. But they have, this has been going on for years. And I feel a little bit like with the community, like, having the being Charlie Brown, you're about to kick the football and someone pulls it away. Because, at one point, it seemed like the community was all together with the developer when he made these promises. And then just over the years, it's been chipping away at that faith in those conditions being met. So I just wanted to speak up for the Maui Meadows community and what I've been feeling from attending their meetings, the annual meetings where the developer comes and gives a report over the last 4 years.
Okay, and did the members feel like they wanted to try and submit written questions or comments to the developer for the committee to try and reach out and get answers? And is next Friday as a deadline to receive the questions too soon, since it's a committee week next week, or you want to get 2
That's
weeks?
fine.
That's fine. Okay. So I guess, we'll compile that. We'll hear back from the developer and we'll share those information. I mean, we have your question. We have about 14 minutes left. Any closing thoughts from our presenter panelists?
As we say in Maui, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have a couple compliance things that I wish you guys could do presentations on as well out in West Maui. I feel inadequate in comparison for my community years. All right.
I don't think we have anything else to say, so yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Yeah, I just had a couple more questions if I could add them to your list for the developer. I don't know if I posed this issue as a question before, but one of them was, are they working in conjunction with Maui Nui Marine Resource Council on water quality testing? Because they are doing MNRC is doing water quality testing along the Kihei coastline. I don't know how far down that goes, but we certainly don't. They certainly should have some information if they're doing that testing. We wouldn't want to see conflicting information. And the other one is, are they working with the Waiahu solar farm on the access road and making sure that those significant sites are not run over by this road? Because I think that solar farm is going to happen relatively quickly. The other question I think I already asked, and I guess those are my additional questions for the developer. I do also want to tell you that my office texted me that the manager of Honua'ula Associates is Wailea Associates LLC. We don't know. She's looking for the names. and that this Honua'ula is not in good standing with DCCA as the 2020 filing has not been made at this point. So maybe we could ask about that as well. Just, are they planning to file their DCCA report?
Council Member King, I could give you a little bit of information about the access road. The archaeologist for that project has said they did their best to survey the sites on their own, and they saw no sites that would be impacted. However, I did ask him personally, did you find all of the associated features with these sites? And he said, we have no idea. It was overgrown. We did the best we could. They weren't located where the GPS points in the HP AIS said they were. So we tried to find what we thought they might be. It didn't appear that any of them would be in the direct path of the road. However, our personal experience of walking the road recently is that there are several unrecorded areas right along the road. And so, we would like to have a way of working with the solar farm to make sure those aren't.
Okay, well, maybe we could have a separate meeting, and I could help you set that up with those folks. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, awesome. Any other final comments from anyone? Seeing none, committee members, if there are no objections, the chair will defer this item.
No objections.
Objections.
So this concludes today's Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee meeting. Thank you very much, committee members. The time is now 11:50 and this meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Chair.
Good job, Chair.
Good job, you guys.
Mahalo.
Good
Have a
job,
good weekend, everybody.
Good job, Chair.
See you next week.
So just to let you know, the mailing address for the partnership is 1999 Avenue of the Stars in Los Angeles,
The
California.
broadcast of Facebook Live has stopped.
Hi, Lee. Were you trying to say something before the end of the meeting?
Mahalo.
Okay.